Losers, losers! Kiss my big Springfield behind, Shelbyville! Woo! Ha ha! I am invincible! Invincible! You. Ow! Oh.
Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, Tiger Tank 12, however you call me, I don't really care, and welcome back to World of Tanks. Today, finally, we are going to be reviewing the KV-4 Kreslavsky. I think I've played a few games now to be sure of what kind of a vehicle it is and what it is like now after they did buff it in patch 1.13. There are a lot of patch notes for this vehicle. I think it was the tank that has gotten the most upgrades out of all the vehicles that they buffed in patch 1.13, and some of these changes really do look very promising, and they do have quite a big impact on how you can play the KV-4 Kreslavsky. The KV-4 Kreslavsky was and still is a very special vehicle. It is basically a KV-4 with a rear-mounted turret. It's not entirely at the back like the VK, for example, but the turret is actually quite far in the back. It's definitely farther in the back than I'd say in the middle, so you can actually side scrape quite nicely with this tank, and that's how people used to play the KV-4 Kreslavsky. Now, what they did improve on is the turret armor, which we'll talk about in just a second. They did improve the hit points. They improved the mobility of the vehicle, they increased the top speed, and they decreased the dispersion. So all in all, this tank has gotten some major buffs. Now let's answer the question, or let's find out the answer to the question, is this tank really worth spending 8,000 bonds on? It's quite a hefty price tag. It is a premium tank, so you will be receiving premium credits, you will be receiving premium crew training, so that is a very big plus. This is not a tier 10 premium tank that doesn't have the credit booster, but this one does have the credit booster like any other standard premium tank that is not a tier 9 or a tier 10 variant. So, very interesting. This KV-4 Kreslavsky has a 107mm gun, which is similar to the 107mm gun that you have on the KV-4, and that is quite a special kind of gun. There's also the KTTS, which is another KV-4 variant, but we're not going to be talking about that at all today. Then we're going to go into some gameplay, and then in the end we're going to have the final verdict on what I think of the KV-4 Kreslavsky right now. Now obviously I did not own this vehicle previously, so I can make a comparison, but I can kind of just look at the stats, see how the vehicle performs now, and then I can get like a little bit of a retrospect in what the vehicle would have performed like before, and then I can have a little bit of a comparison, but I will never have the full picture. So this review is just for the very buffed vehicle, what it's like today. So 107mm gun, let's check out the firepower tab. You have 320 alpha damage, which is pretty much average on tier 8 heavy tanks, probably a bit below average now. 227mm of AP pen, also you are carrying about 103 rounds in this massive vehicle, so you will not have to worry about running out of ammunition anytime soon. You have APCR shells that have an average penetration of 289 millimeters, which is pretty damn good. It's an APCR shell, no heat shell, so you will not have the ability to actually go through, very sloped armor as well as you would be able to do with high explosive anti-tank ammunition. The rate of fire and the gun reload, let's talk about that, and the DPM. You have a rate of fire of 6.29 rounds per minute. That is with a very good crew. We have brothers in arms on every single one of them. We have gun rammer class 2 on this vehicle as well. And if we put on some directives and premium consumables, we could probably up the rate of fire a little bit more. But this is one of the biggest problems of the KV-4 Kreslavsky. The rate of fire and the VPM on this tank is not very good. 9.54 seconds reload time against other tier 8 vehicles. That is going to be quite awkward, especially with that kind of damage output. 320 alpha, that is not going to be very good. So you're going to be having quite a few issues if you're in close quarter combat. You have to rely on your armor a lot more than other vehicles because you don't have the rate of fire that some other tanks have, for example the KV-5, but you do have the penetration, and those kind of things probably will help you a little bit more than when you're playing the KV-5. We're going to compare it a little bit to the KV-5 in just some aspects, because you can play the KV-4 Kreslavsky in a similar kind of way that you can play the KV-5 also, but the KV-5 has preferential matchmaking while the KV-4 Kreslavsky does not. Very important, it does not have premium or preferential matchmaking. So, gun traverse speed or turret turn time is not very good, 25.6 degrees per second. You have 7 degrees of gun depression, which is pretty nice for a Soviet tank, especially with a rear-mounted turret like that. 15 degrees of gun elevation isn't the best in the world though, but you can work with it. You have an aim time of 2.72 seconds, which is pretty bad in my opinion, and the dispersion at 100 meters of 0.36 is really bad as well. So this vehicle is not a very good sniper, and it's supposed to be played in medium to short range engagements. As we already mentioned, the DPM isn't the best either, so that's one of the biggest downsides of the KV-4 Kreslavsky, and it's, I think, similar to the DPM of maybe the IS-5. We can actually check that real fast. The DPM on the IS-5 is even better than on the KV-4 Kreslavsky because it has a better alpha damage. Now we get to the very good points. They actually increased the hit points of this vehicle. It used to be 1,500 and now it is 1,700. I do have the improved hardening class 1 on this, but there are also other options to use equipment on this vehicle, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So 1,870 hit points is massive. That's a massive amount of hit points for a tier 8 vehicle. That is almost tier 9 levels. That's really good. The hull armor and the turret armor also are looking quite nice. We can actually switch over to the armor viewer real quickly, and we have the frontal armor right here, and the lower plate is 180 millimeters thick at about a 90 degree angle, or it's a bit rounded, so yeah, 180. But if you go up a little bit, you have this slight slope, and then you have this machine gun port, and also looks like the driver's hatch and the driver's viewport, which give you a little bit of a bump, which is actually quite weakly armored. So this part is only 158 millimeters thick. So the 180 millimeters thickness do really give you quite a bit of nice protection on this vehicle. If you are in a hull down position or in a side scraping position as well, this tank all of a sudden gets really nice protection. Because 125 millimeters is on the side, 90 on the rear, the turret has a 200 at the front, 160 on the side, and 100 at the rear. But the problem is, although they did buff it a little bit, they buffed the turret armor. I've noticed that a lot of people are shooting premium ammunition, and I'm not sure if it's just the standard now or if they are really afraid of the KV-4 Kreslavsky because it's a hunking Soviet giant. The turret is not very thickly armored. It is the thickest part, at least in sense of armor that you have in a tank, but you know, 230 millimeters thickness. There are some parts that are a bit thicker, but the gun mantlet is quite large. If people are firing heat, what I can promise you a lot of people will be doing, they will be actually able to go right through your turret. The ring below, if there are any snipers out there, the turret ring is also quite weakly armored, 200 millimeters. That's the least thick part of the turret armor. But you know, if you can move your turret and you can get them to bounce off the side right here, the cheeks, you will be able to survive quite a bit. But you have a lot of HP, so you can work with that as well. You have a cupola on top, which is 200 millimeters thick. It is quite round, so there is a high chance of bouncing that. But to be fair, I've noticed a lot of people just switch over to premium shells, and then they just cut right through your turret, and it has been a bit of an annoying experience that I have not seen in a very long time on vehicles that I've played, because I think the KV-4 is like one of those old premium tanks. So moving on to mobility, I'd say we can have a little bit of a verdict on the armor. The armor is basically, it's good, but as soon as people hit the 2 key, your armor is basically going to be swishing away. But now the most important part about the KV-4 Kreslavsky changes. This thing is heavy. It weighs max 110 tons. You can see with my configuration, it's a 93-ton monster, and it has a horsepower engine, or an engine that provides us with 1,350 horsepower. That is pretty damn impressive for that kind of weight as well. We have a top speed of 40 kilometers per hour. That's really, really good. That's quite mobile. Traverse speed is not very good with 23.12 degrees per second, but the specific power to weight ratio is not too bad for a super heavy kind of tank. Now, if you do really want to go for that ramming thing, because this tank weighs a lot, you can actually equip it with quite a few configurations. You can add the turbocharger, which will give you 4 kilometers per hour top speed. Additionally, it will give you 7.5% more engine power, and it will also allow you to have a better traverse speed. You can couple that with another thing, which is modified configurations, which will allow you to just run this tank to the ground, and also use a consumable, which is basically only for the Soviets, the removed speed governor, where you can actually push your tank to the limit. That will damage your engine, probably, but if you have the equipment at hand, which is the modified configuration, you can actually survive the engine fires, and the engine durability is going up by a drastic amount. 150% additional engine durability, or at least, yeah, definitely 150 additional engine durability, and minus 65% chance of engine fire. So basically, you're going to be able to do some ramming action with this tank if you want to. Just check out Quickie Baby's video on this. He has made quite a nice setup, and I think if you want to have some fun with this tank, that is certainly one way to go. Concealment and spotting this tank is not very good. Spotting, I think the max view range is 360 meters, so do not expect to see the world. I think you can work with that. So, in conclusion, the KV-4 Kreslavsky has horrible gun handling, or not horrible gun handling, but pretty bad gun handling. It has below average DPM, which will definitely not give you the best ability to fight back. It has great armor for a tier 8 heavy tank, but that armor can easily be surpassed with any kind of premium shells. I've noticed that people have gotten quite lax about using premium shells, so you will be in the line of fire with premium shells. And obviously the mobility has become quite nice. So you have quite a bit of a leeway to see how you want to play this tank. You can make it into a ramming monster, or you can play it as I'm playing it currently, as a side-scraping kind of heavy tank that tries to rely on its hit points. I haven't had a lot of success, I can say that much so far, but there is certainly potential out there. If you're going up against tier 10 vehicles and tier 9s, this tank really is a bit of a pain. I think that does fit to basically every single tier 8 vehicle that has to face tier 10s, but I think with the Kreslavsky it is really on another level. But I'd say let's jump to the gameplay before I ramble on too long and see what this tank is capable of. So, I have one gameplay ready for you guys, and it's been a bit of a difficult session to get a good gameplay in the KV-4 Kreslavsky. There are several reasons for that, and I think mainly it has to do with the fact that this tank just doesn't have great DPM, and although it is supposedly quite heavily armored, it doesn't really show or transcend into the real gameplay experience. And I think that mainly has to do with the fact that a lot of people are firing premium shells. And I don't even think that the premium shells are necessary. This tank is quite easily penetratable if you just get several things right. Now, before we go into slagging this vehicle off, I want to talk a little bit about the strengths of this tank. What you can see right here is an IS-3, Object 279E, Object 268. All of these were all Soviet tanks, and we are not that slow. As you can see, we're faster than the E-75, we're faster than the T-30, and we can keep up with the Object 279E. Now that's probably one of the best armored tanks in the game, and this player is going to be an important actor in this gameplay. This gameplay is not very long, but I think you can see just what we're up against in a second. The Kreslavsky is not a premium tank that has preferential matchmaking, so you will be facing tier 10 games and tier 9 games. So that's one of the things you have to keep in mind if you want to buy this tank with bonds. Now, obviously, I think the looks of it and the novelty of this tank, that it's a Clan Wars war tank, and that it is also a vehicle that has a rear-mounted turret, is probably one of the reasons why people are interested in it. But I have to be honest, I have not had a lot of fun in this game in the last couple of days. I've played about 5 to 7 games in it, and most of these games were kind of going down very, very quickly, and I wasn't really able to do a lot of stuff in those games. Mainly the fact that the gun, or that this tank didn't have the best kind of rate of fire. The DPM is really something that keeps you, or that limits your ability to be effective. So you can see we're playing on the map highway, and we're in the city right now because we're a heavy tank. And what we want to do right here is we want to put some pressure on these guys by getting as close as possible to them without really getting into a flank immediately. So we have a Brigader 65 over there. I just fire right there before I even see him, because I know he will be repositioning himself just to to peek around the corner again. And there's an E50. I don't know what the E50 is doing. He's kind of getting himself all along the wall, and that's really the nice thing that you can see about this tank. In comparison to the IS-3, for example, or the Object 279, or I don't even know, the Defender, this tank has a bit of accuracy, and as you can see, the gun is quite nicely. So in those close quarter or mid-range engagements, this vehicle will be quite, it will be quite effective, and it's going to be able to help you out quite a bit. So that's something you're not used to when you're playing Soviet tanks. Soviet tanks' accuracy are really, really bad, and most of the time you just have to trust Stalin to guide your shots. So right here we can see that the Object 279E is making a move, and I want to help him. I want to push around here, get this WZ-120. Unfortunately, we go right into the cave of the Lion, and we get hit from the G-SOR, or we get several hits taken from the G-SOR, and he manages to take quite a bit of HP away from us. And that G-SOR is firing only premium. As you can see, obviously a G-SOR is a tank that really is relying on premium. Same with the E-75, but I cannot really blame him because this Object 279E is coming around the corner. And now this is really, really important. You can see that the IS-3 is face-hugging the E-75, and the E-75 doesn't want to be any part of that, so he decides to take on us and shoot us because we are quite an easy target. So that's one of the things you have to keep in mind. This tank is large, it's an easy target, and it's really easy to penetrate it, especially at tier 9 and tier 10. Some tier 8s even don't have any kind of problem going through this tank. And you can see this Object 279E is just an absolute, like, this is the thing. This 279E is basically invincible against basically anything that is out there. He has so much armor. If he just keeps his front towards the enemy, he's not going to be getting hit, or he's not going to take any real damage from it. But we do lose quite a bit of HP if we go out in front, and he still has 1,100 while we have 276 or 67. He's just waiting for us to actually move in and, you know, do get hit so he doesn't have to, and I really hate players like that. I cannot stand them. Luckily right there we bounced the 53 TP, and I don't really want this object 279E to pass through, because I think he doesn't deserve it, because now he's moving in because he can sense that this tier 8 is no real danger. So yeah, the 53 TP obviously is going to be firing at me, because it doesn't make any sense shooting the object 279E because it's a broken tank. Now what you can see is that people still are, you know, focusing me, even though there are other targets. That's probably because I'm low HP, if they can get an easy kill off of me. And that's one of the things you have to keep in mind. So if we can just, you know, skip or reverse back to the actual footage of the tank, what I've noticed with the object... Well, okay, what is going on with the replay? The replay is really weird. I have no idea what that is, but it's probably because I was already dead and I shouldn't have reversed back to a different point, because you can see that. So yes, the KV-4 Kreslavsky, its main strengths are definitely its mobility now. It can reach 40 kilometers per hour top speed, and it actually has quite a nice engine power boost that it got in the update. But what I noticed is that the armor on this tank just really doesn't hold up anymore, and it's really weird because it's like it's a KV-5 but with even less armor, and I have the feeling that I bounced a lot more in my original KV-4 than I did in the Kreslavsky. Obviously you're going to be facing tier 9 and tier 10 vehicles, and it's not a lot of fun, trust me. The gun, on the other hand, I think is quite reliable. It only does about 320 alpha damage, which is a bit of a downer, because obviously for that long of a reload time, you would expect to at least have a bit more alpha damage, but it is only 320, and that leaves you hanging quite unfortunately. So yes, I would say if we conclude this real fast, this little review, I think the KV-4 Kreslavsky is not really a good choice. It can probably make you a little bit of a, like, it can probably be fun if you're playing it a bit like the KV-5 as a ramming tank, but then you need to have the equipment for it. But other than that, I just think that the KV-4 Kreslavsky is not really fitted very well. I know it is probably a better reverse or side scraping tank, but I've noticed the situations where you get into side scraping engagements, well, it's quite limited. Your rate of fire limits you extremely, and yes, I think it's not really worth the 8,000 bonds that you have to pay. There are much better premium tanks that you can get for bonds, for example the AIM-X M4 and the T26E5. Those are definitely better vehicles, and I would really not go for the KV-4 Kreslavsky. I would more or less make a huge kind of way around the vehicle, because it's not very good in combat situations, at least in my opinion. So I hope I could answer your questions about the Kreslavsky, and hopefully you guys have a bit of a better experience than I have if you already purchased it. And if you're thinking about it, look at the other tank first, look at the other ones, and if you already own all of the premium tanks, maybe the Kreslavsky is a tank that could interest you. But in the current state, I just still think it's not really that good.